Hey there, Drowsy Historian here. Tonight you're not a king or a soldier or a man of learning scribbling wisdom into the margins of history. You're a rat catcher, which is to say, a man-shaped sack of disease, desperation, and damp wool. You are not respected, you are not paid enough, and you smell like yesterday's chamber pot left out in the sun. But you are, for now, alive. Your job is to crawl into the filth the rest of the city pretends doesn't exist, and remove its consequences one twitching tail at a time. You'll be bitten, spat on, underpaid, and occasionally set on fire. London won't thank you. It barely tolerates you, but you are needed, just not wanted. Before you wring out your only shirt and shuffle off to drag another bag of squealing rodents through the market, do me one small favour. Comment where you're listening from and what time it is. If you'd like early access to these lovingly bleak bedtime stories, ad-free audio of the episodes, or just want to support the show, you'll find the Patreon link in the description. But for now, lie back, get comfortable, and remind yourself someone has to do this job. And tonight, it's you. Let's begin. You awaken to the sound of something gnawing, not fast or frantic, but rhythmic, confident, a wet sort of chewing, echoing faintly through the beams above your head. You open your eyes and stare at the ceiling, or what's left of it. The plaster has long since given up, and what remains is mostly wood, stained dark with the memory of every leak this hovel has ever suffered. A rat is up there, halfway through a biscuit it didn't ask permission to steal. It pauses mid-crunch and looks down at you, eyes glinting in the thin grey morning light, as if to say, "You again?" You sigh. The rat does not. It finishes the biscuit and vanishes into the rafters. You pull your legs out from under the crusted blanket, feel the cold slap of the floor through your socks, still damp from yesterday, and prepare to begin another day of not quite dying. The room you call yours is technically a room in the same way that a ditch is technically a bed. 4 walls, more or less. A window, permanently fogged with mould. A bed frame that lost the will to stand upright sometime during the last rain. There's a pile of rags in the corner where your boots are meant to live, but they've taken to hiding from you after the last time you stepped in something that hissed. The floor, always generous with its offerings, gifts you a squelch as you cross it barefoot, your right boot having mysteriously gone missing in the night. You suspect the rat, not for eating it necessarily, but for moving it somewhere you'll only find once the smell becomes impossible to ignore. The walls are sweating again. You're not sure why they do this. The landlord insists it's just moisture from the pipes, though the building predates the concept of plumbing and possibly gravity. It doesn't matter. The air inside is always damp. Not a refreshing mist, but the kind of moisture that seems to burrow under your skin and set up camp, like a fungus with long-term ambitions. You wipe a patch of wall absently with your sleeve and come away with a smear of something too dark to be mildew and too sticky to be safe. You sniff it. You regret that decision. Breakfast then. Your morning meal is a ritual you perform more out of obligation than expectation. You retrieve a crust of bread from the chipped tin on the shelf, hardened from exposure and dotted with the unmistakable chew marks of your cohabitants. You snap off the end, sniff it, and dunk it in a bowl of water you collected from the shared courtyard pump yesterday morning. It has developed a faint cloudiness overnight, a sort of personality. You chew with the mechanical slowness of someone who understands that speed will only encourage the gag reflex. It is not good, but it is food, and food is not guaranteed. You remind yourself of this while swallowing. You dress in what could generously be called your work uniform. A shirt once white, now closer to a shade of melancholy beige, clings to your skin in damp protest. The trousers, patched, torn, and stained with more substances than you care to catalogue, slide on with effort. One leg resists, you pull harder. A rat, small and offended, bolts out of the cuff and disappears behind the hearth. You nod Not in surprise, but in apology for the intrusion. You tighten the belt around your waist, though it doesn't need tightening. You've been eating less lately. Everyone has. Even the rats seem thinner, though you'd never say it to their faces. A brief search for your boots ends in defeat. One is behind the bucket you use as a toilet. The other is under the bed, where it has developed a layer of fuzz you don't recognise and choose not to investigate. You lace them up slowly, fingers aching from the cold. The joints crack. One fingernail has turned black again. You'll lose it soon. The thought doesn't bother you. You've lost more important things. Before leaving, you pause at the mirror, a shard of reflective glass nailed into the wall with a bent fork. Your face looks back at you, sleep-crushed and vaguely damp. Stubble clings to your chin like mould on bread. One eye is bloodshot. The other is slightly swollen from a bite you acquired during last night's sleep. Or maybe during last night's work. The difference is academic. You prod at the swelling, wince, and then pick the scab on your lip just to give your hand something to do. You've stopped expecting improvement. You now aim for not noticeably worse. At the door you gather your tools, such as they are. A sack with a torn seam. A stick with a nail hammered through one end. A small pouch of flour to scatter as a primitive trap. And of course your wits, though those tend to wander off by mid-afternoon and leave you on your own. You open the door and step into the hallway, where the familiar stench of boiled socks and human indecency greets you like an old friend. Someone upstairs is coughing. Someone downstairs is arguing with a rat. You offer no judgment. You've been both people before. And so you descend the stairs, one creaking, greasy step at a time, each footfall a prayer that the structure will hold another day. Outside, the sky's the colour of dishwater. The street is already slick with refuse and whatever passed for weather in the night. You tug your coat tighter around your shoulders. It doesn't help. Your breath fogs in front of your face, and your stomach growls, confused that you're walking away from the place where food is supposed to happen. But it's time. The rats won't catch themselves, and if they did, they wouldn't bring them to market for tuppence a tail. You are awake. You are upright. You are a rat catcher in Georgian London. God help you, no one else will. Your tools are laid out across the table like artifacts from a long-lost civilization, dedicated to bad luck and tetanus. There's no polish, no gleam, no satisfying heft to any of them. Just wear, rust, and the unmistakable scent of rodent death baked into the grain of every wooden handle. You once read, or overheard more likely, that a man is only as good as his tools. If that's true, you are somewhere between obsolete and cursed. Still, you gather them one by one, as you do every morning, with the reverence of someone preparing for a job that the world insists must be done, but refuses to acknowledge in polite company. Your sack is the most important piece, and the most treacherous. Burlap, once coarse and sturdy, now softened by years of use and soaked through memories. The seams are patched with string, wire, and a ribbon someone once gave you during a night you only half remember. The bottom is damp, always damp, no matter how many times you dry it by the fire. It smells like mildew and defeat. You've named the largest hole the exit, and learned to tie it shut in 3 different ways depending on how violent the rats are that day. It never really works, but it gives you a sense of control. A fantasy, really. Still, you carry it like a knight carries a sword, even though yours is full of things that bite. Next comes your gloves, which is to say, the idea of gloves. You haven't had a matching pair since your apprentice years, back when you believed this job might lead to something better, like stable work or a tolerable death. Now one glove is stiff leather, cracked and flaking like old skin. The other is wool, so riddled with holes, it qualifies more as a suggestion than a garment. On cold days, you try to wear both. On warm days, you choose whichever smells less like last week's lunch. Neither is waterproof. Both are permeable to teeth. Your traps are a sad collection of second-hand contraptions and homemade improvisations. A few are the classic spring-loaded kind, gifted to you by a man named Harris, who died spectacularly after one snapped shut on a finger, already infected from something else. You think of him every time you set them. One is carved from wood, bound with a metal hinge that never closes quite fast enough. Another is just a brick and a stick, a design you refined after watching a child crush a rat out of boredom. Efficiency over elegance. They don't always kill cleanly, but then again, neither do you. You also carry a satchel of bait, though calling it that is generous. Bits of mouldy cheese, chunks of dried meat, half a sausage that's more casing than content. Rats, being opportunists, tend to go for it anyway. They don't require flavour, just calories, much like your neighbours. You've experimented in the past, lard, candle wax, spoiled milk-soaked bread, but these tend to attract more than just rats. Last time you used goose fat, a stray dog followed you home and refused to leave until it bit you on the shin and ran off with your trousers. You still have the scar. The dog still has the trousers. And of course, there's your stick. Your most loyal companion. Oak, you think, or something close enough, smoothed by years of sweaty palms and rodent impact. One end is blunted from use. The other has a nail driven through it at a slight angle, meant to hook or puncture depending on your mood and the size of the target. You sharpen it every Sunday, a sort of religious observance. Some men polish swords. You hone iron into rat-stabbing shape. It's not glamorous, but it works, which is more than you can say for your boots, your lungs, or your last relationship. You used to carry a lantern, but it got kicked into a sewer during a job that ended with you knee-deep in slurry and nearly blind from the fumes. Since then, you've taken to working by candlelight or trusting your night vision, which has improved only slightly. You can now distinguish between large rats and small cats with reasonable accuracy. That said, you did once chase a hat for nearly 10 minutes. It didn't squeak. It also didn't pay you 3p when you brought it to the rat merchant. Lesson learned. You have no uniform, no badge, no identification that marks you as anything other than what you are. A man with a bag and a stick who smells like fear and vinegar. On a good day, someone might mistake you for a chimney sweep. On a bad day, a corpse. Either way, no one stops you when you walk into their home, provided you use the servant entrance and keep your eyes down. You are expected to be invisible, except to the rats. They see you. They remember you. Some, you're convinced, even hold grudges. Sometimes you think about upgrading your kit, investing in real traps, real gloves, something that doesn't leave your hands bleeding after a full day's work. But then the landlord raises the rent again, or the price of bread jumps for no clear reason, and you remind yourself that you're lucky just to have tools at all. A boy down the street tried catching rats barehanded last week. He's missing a thumb now. You nodded politely when he showed you. Told him it was a clean break. It wasn't. But people like you learn early on that the truth is a luxury. So you sling the sack over your shoulder, feel the familiar weight of everything that doesn't work the way it should, and take one last look around your room. No one else is going to do this job. That's the one mercy of it. There's no competition, no envy. Just you, your tools, and the squeaking, skittering certainty that the city is always losing its battle against the dark corners. And you are the one sent into those corners, stick first. The first job of the day takes you to Crick & Sons Bakery, a crumbling establishment, best known for its generous use of stale flour and its complete lack of shame. The shop front is modest. Chipped sign, warped windows, and a permanent smell of scorched crust and desperation. You're not here for the bread. You're here for the sound the baker heard in the crawl space beneath his ovens, a wet, rustling shuffle he described as too busy to be mice. You already know what it is. The only mystery is how many there are, how angry they've become, and how many will still have teeth when you're finished. The baker, a man shaped like uncooked dough, greets you with a grunt and gestures to the back. He doesn't offer pleasantries. He doesn't need to. You are, to him, a tool, like a broom with opinions. The floorboards creak as you walk past racks of hardening rolls, each one looking vaguely ashamed of itself. The heat from the ovens mingles with the ambient damp to create an atmosphere best described as yeasty tomb. At the rear of the shop, beneath a splintering work table, a hole gapes in about shoulder wide and just tall enough to crawl into on your belly. The smell is immediate, a humid wave of old grain, rat urine, and something decomposing with enthusiasm. You kneel and peer inside. It's dark, of course. Always is. The dirt floor slopes away at an angle that suggests either poor construction or a long-term structural collapse no one's had the heart to fix. The walls are brick, but only just. Most are slick with moisture, and some crumble at the corners. You light a stub of candle and fix it into your helmet. A tin bowl you've modified with wax and wire. The flame flickers, casting long shadows over the rough contours of the tunnel. Movement catches your eye. 1, 2, maybe 6 pairs of glinting points vanish into the gloom. You exhale slowly. The warmth of it drifts back into your face. You are sweating already. You lower yourself into the hole, elbows scraping along the entrance as your hips wedge briefly in the tight space. You've put on weight, not from eating, but from bruises and swelling. The rats have a way of leaving marks that bloom over days like internal mould. You wiggle forward, shoulders dragging through dirt and rat droppings, and immediately feel something skitter over your boot. You tell yourself it was imaginary. You don't believe yourself. The light ahead is useless now. The space narrows and you have to tilt your head to keep moving. The back of your neck is slick. Your shirt clings to your spine like a damp rag. The air gets thicker with every breath. After 5 feet, you find the nest. It's less of a structure and more of an ecosystem. Grain sacks torn open, cloth chewed to ribbons, wooden planks gnawed to pulp. The smell is extraordinary. Not strong like sewage, but layered. Fermenting yeast, spoiled barley, the iron tang of blood, and beneath it all the sour, unmistakable stench of rat. Oily, musky, alive. You ease your sack into position and reach for your stick. The nail end is already sticky from last week's job. Something you meant to clean, but didn't. You raise it, inch forward, and strike. The first rat yelps. The second charges. You swing again, catching fur and fury in equal measure. It shrieks and vanishes into the shadows, leaving a smear behind. They are faster than usual, more desperate. You see one dart between your knees and disappear behind you. Another lunges from the side and clamps onto your arm, just below the elbow. The pain is immediate and sharp, followed by the warm spread of blood soaking into your sleeve. You slam it against the wall. It drops. You keep moving. The baker's boy, perhaps 13 and already shaped like a future disappointment, crouches at the entrance and watches you with blank curiosity. He picks his nose with the kind of idle concentration only the young possess and sniffs. "They bad?" he asks, voice echoing slightly down the tunnel. You grunt in reply. He nods and continues excavating his nostril, as though your suffering were a mildly interesting weather report. You don't blame him. You wouldn't care either, in his position. Another rat bites your hand. This one hangs on longer. You shake it once, twice, then drive it into the ground with your stick. Its spine makes a sound like wet celery. You are bleeding more now. You press the torn edge of your glove into the wound and hope it clots. You count the bites. 3. Not bad, all things considered. Last week you took 5 and nearly lost a finger. This is progress. This is professionalism. After what feels like an hour, but is probably 15 minutes, the squeaking fades. The movement dies down. You retrieve 3 carcasses and drive off the rest with threats and mild kicks. You gather what you can, tails for proof, bodies for sale. Some escape, they always do. You cannot win, only delay. You reverse out of the crawl space, knees raw, shoulder torn, sack half full. Your hair is matted with dirt and grease. Your fingers sting. Your back protests every movement. You stand slowly, one hand pressed to the side of the table for balance. The baker says nothing. He eyes your sack, makes a face and tosses you a coin that rolls under a crate. You retrieve it without comment. It smells faintly of dough and sweat. You do not thank him. He does not offer bread. You are not a customer. You are a necessity. And now you're done here. As you step back into the street, light stabbing at your eyes, you notice something squirming just inside your shirt. You slap it hard and feel it drop into your waistband. It may be alive. It may not be. You don't check, there's no time. The next job awaits, and your blood hasn't even dried yet. This, by the way, is considered a good start to the day. You don't go home after the bakery. That would be giving in. Instead, you duck into a nearby alley, not for privacy, but because it smells only mildly worse than you do, and the shadows make it easier to pretend you're not about to perform minor surgery with a boot knife and a strip of apron. You sit on an overturned bucket that's just wet enough to be threatening and roll up your trouser leg. The fabric peels back with a moist reluctance, and the bite on your calf greets the open air like an old friend. Red, puffy, ringed with a faint yellow crust that suggests the beginning of a new and exciting stage in your ongoing medical decline. You prod it once, not because it helps, but because you always do. The pain is sharp and radiating, like someone's whispering the word infection directly into your bloodstream. You clench your jaw and dig into your coat pocket for the makeshift kit you keep for moments, exactly like this. One frayed bit of cloth that used to be white, a coil of string, and a small bottle of something clear that might be vinegar or might be gin. You stopped labelling things after the rat chewed through your ink pot. You uncork the bottle and pour a bit over the wound. It stings, of course, not dramatically. Just enough to remind you that nerve endings still exist, whether you like it or not. You use your thumb to press down just beside the puncture and watch, with clinical detachment, as a thin string of pus oozes out. It's not much, not enough to panic. You've seen worse, had worse. Still, you tilt your head for a moment and listen. Not for danger, but for the subtle hiss that sometimes comes from deeper infections. A kind of fizzing under the skin that means something very bad is happening very quietly. Nothing today, just the rustle of rubbish, the distant barking of dogs, and the ever-present squeak of rats moving just out of sight. You breathe out and tie the cloth around your leg, yanking it tight enough to bite. The string you use to secure it is older than your current boots and smells faintly of fish. You tie it in a clumsy knot and test your weight. The leg holds, barely. You wince not from the pain exactly, but from the knowledge that the pain is familiar. Expected. Routine. Your body is no longer a temple. It's a ruin that someone still lights candles in, hoping the roof doesn't cave in mid-prayer. You hobble to your feet, ignoring the fresh bloom of sweat across your brow and the way your vision goes slightly grey around the edges when you stand too fast. That's just blood loss. You'll walk it off. You've been bitten enough times to know the patterns. First comes the swelling, a warm, pulsing throb, like your leg is being slowly inflated from the inside by someone with poor aim. Then the stiffness sets in, spreading up your joints like rust on a hinge. If you're lucky, it stops there. If you're not, the fever arrives, subtle at first, to a slight chill that makes your teeth click together like castanets. Then comes the heat, the sweat, the dreams. Not the pleasant kind either. You once spent 3 full days hallucinating a conversation with a rat who insisted he was your landlord. He charged you rent in cheese and criticised your posture. You keep walking. The alley spits you back into the street, where the noise of the city resumes its usual rhythm. Cart wheels grinding over cobbles, hawkers shouting about turnips, someone somewhere vomiting with flair. You nod at a butcher you vaguely know. He nods back, eyes lingering on the blood soaking through your trouser. He doesn't ask, you don't explain. That's the arrangement. Everyone here is a little bit broken, and no one has time to catalogue how. By midday, the chill has begun. It's subtle, like someone left a window open in your bones. You wrap your coat tighter and press on to the next job, a cellar under a chandler's shop that's been smelling funny since Thursday. You crawl through half-solid wax drippings and discover the smell is a rat that got trapped in a crate of tallow and melted into it. You scoop the thing out with your stick, bag it, and accept your coin. The shopkeeper gags. You don't. You haven't gagged in years. Your stomach only reacts now when there's actual food in it. By the time you're back above ground, your vision has started to shimmer at the edges. Heat prickles across your scalp. Your shirt clings to your chest. You try to remember if you drank water today. You try to remember if you've ever drunk water that didn't make things worse. You sit for a moment on a low wall, head in your hands, and breathe slowly. A child passes by and asks if you're dying. You shake your head. They nod and keep walking. It's not an unreasonable question. You hallucinate, just briefly, as the sun dips low. Nothing elaborate, just a momentary impression that your sack of rats is whispering. You squint at it. It stops. You chalk it up to dehydration, or the fever, or maybe just the daily erosion of sanity that comes with being professionally unwanted. You stretch your leg. It doesn't respond. That's normal. Probably. By dusk the fever breaks, or maybe it simply plateaus. You can walk again, though your gait has acquired a limp and a faint squish. You pass a woman selling boiled sweets and consider buying one, but realise you just use it to plug a hole in your boot. You touch your bandage again. It's warm. So are you. That could mean recovery, or it could mean you're just warmer now, because your body's fighting a war it doesn't plan to win. Either way, there's still light left, and you've still got 2 more houses to visit. The rats don't care about your fever, and they certainly don't mind if you die. Just try not to bleed on the customers. You make your way toward the market with your sack of rats slung over one shoulder, the weight of it shifting uncomfortably against your back. It's heavier than usual, which should be a good thing. More rats means more money, in theory. But in practice it means more twitching, more squirming, more chance of something chewing through the burlap and making a break for freedom halfway through your walk. You've double knotted the top with a bit of laundry line and muttered a prayer to whatever god oversees infestations. You suspect it's the same one who oversees your landlord. The streets leading into the market are a parade of smells so powerful they seem to have colour. Roasting meat, spoiled cabbage, unwashed bodies and the ever-present fog of horse dung mixed with ash. Your nose doesn't flinch anymore. You've trained it like a soldier trains for war, except your battlefield is a crowded alley of desperate sellers and indifferent buyers, and your enemies are mostly alive in the sack at your hip. You push through a tangle of fishmongers and trinket peddlers, stepping over a puddle that might be water or might be something more ambitious, and head for the small corner known unofficially as Vermin Row. The rat merchant's stall is barely more than a few crates stacked against the side of a crumbling wall, draped with a moth-eaten cloth to provide shade and the illusion of legitimacy. His name is Mr. Blight, though you're reasonably sure that's not the one he was born with. He's squat and pale, with a face like a mashed potato that got left out too long. His hands are always greasy, and not in the culinary sense. You've never seen him smile with both eyes at once. He counts coins with the same expression most people reserve for checking cuts of meat for mould. You drop the sack onto his scales, which creak ominously. A few rats wriggle inside, and one lets out a shriek that sounds almost human. Mr. Blight doesn't flinch. He pokes at the bulge with a stick and scowls, like a chef inspecting undercooked poultry. "Too mangy," he mutters, as if that's your fault. You wipe your forehead and gesture broadly at the skyline. A patchwork of smoke, crumbling rooftops, and distant factory soot. They reflect their environment, you offer. Local colour. He doesn't laugh. He doesn't even pretend to consider it. He jabs at the sack again, prodding the more lifeless parts toward one corner. Got a buyer for clean ones. School needs them for dissection. You bring me anything with visible pustules, they don't fetch but half. You consider explaining that pustules are a natural part of life down there, in the cellars and alleys, but you know better. This isn't a conversation, it's a ritual. He declares your catch substandard. You accept his disdain and reduced rate. And in return, he hands you a handful of coins so thin they might as well be apology tokens. It's not enough. It never is. But it's more than nothing. The market buzzes around you, loud, chaotic, half mad. People bartering with desperation, disguised as charm. A woman shouting about gooseberries. A boy chasing a pickpocket who looks barely older than he is. You pocket your earnings, feeling the sweat soak deeper into your shirt, and allow yourself a moment to consider what else you could have done with your life. Then you remember your reading level, your social status, and your face, currently smeared with grime, blood, and something you suspect came from a sewer. That moment passes. You step aside to repack your sack, checking for escapees. One rat is definitely gone. You catch a glimpse of it bolting under a cabbage cart. It's not your problem anymore. If the grocer complains, you'll deny everything. You're not above lying about rodents. Your profession is built on ambiguity. You sell pest control to people who wouldn't piss on you if you were a flame. And you sell the pests to a man who marks them up for scientific consumption, snake feed, and, on rare occasion, novelty pies. The circle of commerce is complete, and you are its most disposable cog. Mr. Blight is already distracted, arguing with another rat catcher, a man with better boots and a cleaner face, which naturally means you hate him. They haggle over a bundle that writhes with unnatural energy. Blight lifts one by the tail, squints and announces, "Pregnant." The other man shrugs, feigning ignorance. You step away, uninterested in the politics of rat fertility. The man shoots you a glance, smug, pitying. You pretend not to notice. You're good at pretending. With your transaction complete, you wander a little before leaving the market, letting your legs take you past stalls you can't afford and smells you'd rather forget. A butcher slaps flies off a haunch of questionable meat. A girl sells wilted flowers in a basket made of shoelaces. A preacher on a box warns of the end times. You consider correcting him. They've already arrived. He just missed the memo. But your throat's dry and your patience thinner than your coin pouch. You pass a stall selling boiled sweets and slow down. Not to buy, of course, but the smell reminds you of something. A birthday, maybe, or a brief moment of kindness, before your life took on the distinct flavour of rat urine and resignation. You allow yourself 3 deep breaths before moving on. Behind you, someone screams, not your concern. Could be a pickpocket, could be a scalding pot, could be a rat. They're everywhere after all, in the walls, in the gutters, in the cracks of this city's rotting teeth. And for a few coins a day, you chase them. Some days, you wonder who's really infesting whom. The summons comes by boy, not one you know, but the type that carries messages between houses with too many staircases and too few practical skills. He finds you outside the tanner's yard, chewing on a piece of bread so stale it may legally qualify as a building material. "Rat in the nursery," he says, not bothering with a greeting. He hands you a folded slip of paper that smells faintly of lavender and ink, and without waiting for a reply, turns and sprints away, as if remaining in your proximity any longer might lower his social status by osmosis. You consider crumpling the note and tossing it into the gutter, but work is work, and a townhouse job pays better, usually, not in kindness but in coin. You can live without kindness. The house is 3 streets over and stands out immediately, not because it's beautiful, it isn't, but because someone clearly wants it to be. Clean shutters, fresh whitewash, a brass knocker polished within an inch of its life. The sort of place that screams respectability with a slightly trembling voice. You knock at the back door because men like you don't approach from the front. Not unless you want the constables involved. A maid answers, young and pink-faced with sleeves rolled up and teeth clenched. She looks you over like she's bracing for a smell, which is fair, and then opens the door wide enough for you to slip in without brushing against the wallpaper. "The nursery," she says, already turning away, top of the second stair, behind the sewing room. You follow, saying nothing, because she's not listening. Her shoes are soft-soled and expensive. Yours are covered in mud, and at least one kind of blood. The contrast echoes with every step. As you climb the stairs, the scent changes, less rot, more polish, but underneath it all that familiar note of decay, barely covered by perfume and painted plaster. You've been in enough houses like this to know what's coming. At the nursery door, she pauses and glances at your sack. "I've seen bigger rats than your whole kit," she mutters, more to herself than to you. You're not sure if it's an insult or a warning. Possibly both. You shrug and step inside. The room is all lace and pastel wallpaper, with a crib nestled near the window, and a stuffed bear that costs more than you earn in a week perched beside it. Everything here is trying very hard to be soft, to be gentle, to convince the eye that danger is a foreign concept. And yet the stench gives it away. That oily, sour reek of fur and droppings, and whatever else the little bastards drag in with them. You spot the damage immediately. Claw marks along the baseboards, a shredded edge of curtain, and in one corner, a wet stain where the wallpaper bubbles out from the wall in a suspiciously rat-shaped lump. You approach the bulge slowly, drawing your stick with one hand and nudging your sack open with the other. Behind you, the maid lifts the baby from its crib and retreats to the doorway, clutching it like a sack of screaming flour. It howls in her arms, red-faced and furious. You sympathise. The wallpaper peels back with a wet hiss and, sure enough, the rat is waiting, big, ugly, and bold. It hisses. You hiss back. It lunges. You swing. The stick connects with a thunk, and the rat disappears behind the bureau, trailing a smear of something dark and unpleasant. You circle the furniture, nudging it aside with your boot, and jab blindly underneath. Another screech, this one much higher pitched. You don't know if it's the rat or the baby. Could be both. You jab again, and feel something crunch. You retrieve the corpse with the nail end of your stick. Hold it up for inspection. It's fat, missing a patch of fur, and has something embedded in its flank that looks like a sewing pin. You grimace and drop it into the sack. The baby screams louder. You nearly join in. Behind you, the maid mutters something about calling the plasterer again. You nod, though she isn't looking at you. She places the baby back in the crib, as if it were made of glass, and gestures vaguely toward the door. That'll be all. You don't argue. You weren't expecting tea. You weren't expecting gratitude. You leave the nursery with a slight limp and a new stain on your sleeve. The maid slips you a few coins in the hallway. Eyes averted. You thank her with a grunt. She closes the door before you finish speaking. Outside, the city air feels even thicker. You lean against the rail for a moment, catching your breath, and glance up at the nursery window. The baby's cries have stopped. Maybe it's sleeping. Maybe it's just out of voice. You don't know. You're not a doctor. You're not even quite a man as far as people like that household are concerned. Just a necessary nuisance, like rain or sewage or guilt. You check the sack. The rat inside is dead but still warm. It twitches as you adjust it and you flinch. It's reflex, not fear. You've seen worse, but it never gets easier. Not really. Not when you're elbow deep in someone else's idea of safety, dragging vermin out from behind the illusions. Because no matter how expensive the curtains are, the rats always find their way in. By late afternoon, the sun has dipped behind the factory roofs and left the streets in a kind of washed-out grey. Not quite twilight, not quite still day, but dim enough that shadows seem to move a little quicker. You stop beneath a railway arch, not to rest, but to itch. The need has been growing steadily since midday, a slow-building hum under your skin that now demands full attention. You reach up, scratch the back of your neck, and watch a flea leap from your collar to your sleeve with the casual grace of someone who's lived rent-free for months. You know them by type now. Fleas are the sprinters, fast, cocky little black seeds of chaos that ride the hem of your clothing and explode into motion the moment light hits them. Lice are subtler, squatters by nature, clinging to the warm valleys of your scalp, hatching whole generations in the silence between heartbeats. Mites are the specialists, burrowing in close, too small to see but precise in their misery. And then there are the worms, internal and indifferent, wriggling companions you've never seen but feel the consequences of daily. They eat what you eat, sometimes more. You scratch your chest and watch a small puff of dead skin drift down like grey snow. It lands on your boot. You don't brush it off. What would be the point? Your shirt, already damp with sweat, and something else that smells vaguely medicinal but isn't, clings to your back. You can feel it pulling against fresh scabs as you move. You scratch again, your ribs this time, and wince as your nail catches a patch that bleeds too easily. It's nothing dramatic, just another tiny wound in a body composed largely of tiny wounds. You smell faintly of iron and yeast. A week ago, you named one of the lice, Cedric. You spotted him while combing through your hair, with a bit of fork tine you sharpened on a doorstep. He was bigger than the others, slower, more dignified in a way. You let him live. You figured he'd earned it. You even started talking to him on the longer walks between jobs. Just little things, complaints, observations, the occasional bit of rat gossip. It helped. Then 2 nights ago, you went to scratch and found only his crushed body on your pillow. You buried him under a loose floorboard and haven't spoken aloud since. Grief changes a man. Your skin flakes like old pastry, pale, dry, brittle at the edges. Your scalp is an ecosystem in collapse. Your stomach makes noises that sound like protest and feel like rebellion. You haven't had a regular bowel movement in 3 weeks. What does come out of you has the consistency of a curse and the colour of regret. Sometimes you see things wriggling in the mess, but you don't look closely. You're not a scholar. You're not being graded. The worms are part of you now, like your limp or your cough, or the spot on your foot that never heals. A dog growls as you pass an alley. You flinch, not from fear of the dog, but from the reminder that other creatures are territorial, even over garbage. You nod to it in passing, a silent agreement between 2 infested bodies pretending to be alive. You're not so different, you and the dog. You've both got fleas after all. The main difference is that the dog doesn't have to pay rent. You once tried bathing every day for a week. A noble experiment. You boiled water on the stove, scrubbed with lye, burned your clothes, and even aired out your sack. By the 3rd day, the itching had lessened. By the 5th, it was nearly gone. By the 7th, the fever began. You suspect the fleas had kept your immune system occupied. When they left, the real infections had room to move in. You haven't tried bathing like that again. Cleanliness, you've learned, is a trap. You do have soap, though, a hard sliver kept in a tin with a cracked lid. It smells of lavender, but only faintly. You use it when you know you'll be in someone's home longer than a minute. A quick wipe behind the ears, under the chin. It's not hygiene, it's camouflage, a way to make the itch seem slightly more presentable. No one is fooled, least of all you. Sometimes late at night, you lie still and try to count the movements on your skin. You try to distinguish flea from louse by sensation alone. You itch in places you can't reach, places you didn't know had nerve endings. You shift, scratch, bleed and scratch again. Eventually, you fall asleep. Not out of comfort, but out of exhaustion. You've stopped asking whether it can get worse. It can, it has, it will. The parasites are just part of it. A chorus of tiny mouths singing a song you can't ignore. And besides, you've been with them longer than you've been with most people. They don't judge. They don't leave. They don't lie. They feed, and in their own way, they remind you that you're still edible, that you're still warm, that you're still alive technically. You scratch your shoulder until you draw blood, sigh, and move on. There's work to do. The rats don't care if you're itchy, neither do the people who pay you, but Cedric would have listened. The news comes from a boy with a crooked smile and no shoes, who delivers it with the same tone one might use to comment on the weather. Gregory's dead, he says, tugging at his sleeve, already scanning the ground for something else worth scavenging. You pause mid-step, one boot planted in a questionable puddle and the other halfway onto a curb that smells strongly of vinegar and despair. You nod slowly. Not in surprise, you've been expecting Gregory to die for at least a year, but in acknowledgement. The sort of nod you give when someone finally follows through on a long-threatened promise. No one knows exactly how it happened. Some say a rat got him in the thigh, deep enough to hit an artery. Others swear it was the gin. He'd been drinking it by the jug lately, though not always by mouth. And there's a version where the barkeep at the Hollow Stoat finally had enough of Gregory's singing and introduced his skull to a table leg. You've heard each story twice already by noon, and by dusk there'll be new ones. Doesn't matter. He's dead either way. What remains of him is somewhere behind the apothecaries, not buried, just stored, like something waiting to be hauled off with the rest of the week's inconveniences. You knew Gregory well in the way that two people with the same injuries and different scars know each other. You never called him a friend. There's no such thing in this trade. But you shared gin when it was cheap, and wounds when they needed stitching. He once pulled a rat out of your boot, after it wedged itself in, and refused to leave. You, in turn, helped him pull 3 of his own teeth, during a fever spell, brought on by eating something that had previously been bait. It was an understanding, not a relationship. Rat catchers don't get funerals. They get replacements. You hear someone else mention his sack, left behind in surprisingly good condition considering. Supposedly, it has only one major hole, and the rope's still sturdy. The merchant blight says he'll hand it over to whoever wants it most, though hand might be generous. You imagine it more as a casual toss into the street. First come, first equipped. You consider going. Not out of sentiment, Gregory never washed the thing, but because your own sack is beginning to dissolve at the corners. It could be an upgrade. It's the closest you'll come to a promotion. By mid-afternoon, someone's already wearing Gregory's coat, though it doesn't fit right and smells like a mildew-soaked tragedy. You recognise the man in it, some young idiot who's only been catching rats for 3 months and still thinks of the job as temporary. He walks differently now, with the swagger of someone who believes inheritance implies talent. He won't last. The coat will outlive him. It's already outlived Gregory, which is more than you can say for most garments in this line of work. You don't mourn, not properly. There isn't time, and there isn't purpose. Mourning is a luxury reserved for those who die in beds with clean sheets. Gregory died in the same boots he was born into this job wearing, cracked, stained, and probably host to an entire ecosystem of their own. You do feel something though, not grief exactly, a kind of hollow acknowledgement, like something small inside you just stepped out for air and won't be coming back. You do pass the alley behind the apothecary, out of curiosity more than anything. There's a sheet over what's left of him, thin, grey, unconvincing. A small puddle of something seeps from underneath it. You don't look too closely. Death, in your experience, rarely looks better the second time. You pause long enough to tug the edge of your cap, not as a sign of respect but as a reflex. Then you move on. The sack, as it turns out, has already been taken. You feel a strange sort of irritation at that. Not because you needed it, not even because you deserved it, but because it would have been nice, just once, to be first in line for something, even if that something was blood-soaked burlap. You spit into the gutter and keep walking. The itch under your collar is getting worse, and your left boot has developed a flap that slaps against the pavement like a slow applause. You make a note to find a cobbler who's open to barter, or at least willing to be distracted long enough for theft. As evening settles over the city like a damp rag, you think about Gregory again. Not his death, but the way he used to hum when he worked. Tuneless, constant, like a kettle just on the edge of boil. You wonder if that was comfort or madness. Probably both. You don't hum when you work. You breathe through your mouth and hope the rats go quietly. But you remember the sound, and it sticks with you. By the time you reach your next job, a flooded basement with more rats than floorboards, the memory is gone. Not erased, just filed away. Like so many others, you lower yourself into the muck, sack in one hand, stick in the other, and begin again. Gregory's gone, the rats remain, and so, for now, do you. By the time you reach the tavern, the sky is sunk into a colourless murk, and your limbs have started to lock up in protest. The bite on your leg is hot again, and your fingers have taken on that odd stiff ache that comes from a long day of gripping something too tightly. In your case, a stick embedded with other people's problems. You push through the crooked door of the Swan and Turnip, a name that promises far more elegance than the interior delivers. The floor is sticky in a way that suggests several layers of former meals, and the air is warm with the communal breath of men who've long since stopped caring about dignity. You find your usual seat, or at least the one no one else wants, near the hearth, though far enough to avoid the dripping from the ceiling. The bench is uneven and slick where the varnish gave up, but it holds your weight. You let your sack drop beside you. It groans slightly. Or maybe you did. You're not sure anymore. Across the room, a man you vaguely recognise is explaining to no one in particular that he once killed a rat the size of a cat, and that it spoke to him just before it died. No one listens. You nod once in quiet solidarity. A girl, or possibly a very tired woman, brings your meal. She doesn't ask what you want. She doesn't write anything down. She simply places a wooden bowl on the table, slops something into it from a pot that smells like boiled remorse, and walks away without looking at your face. You admire her professionalism. The bowl contains a crust of bread, a gristly bone that may have once belonged to something farmed, and a pale, shredded heap of what might generously be called cabbage. You poke it with your spoon, and it wilts further, ashamed of itself. The bread is hard, the kind of hard that cracks teeth and makes you grateful for the ones you've already lost. You soften it slightly in your ale, which is warm, and tastes like someone filtered it through an old boot and didn't apologise. You sip it anyway. It's not about flavour, it's about calories and the illusion of comfort. The bone offers very little resistance when you suck on it, which means someone else has already taken anything worthwhile. The cabbage, if that's what it is, squishes against your tongue with the texture of wet paper. You chew, you swallow, you continue. Across from you, a woman sits alone, staring at nothing with admirable focus. Her face is lined in a way that speaks more to fatigue than age, and her hair is pulled back with a strip of cloth that was probably white sometime in the last decade. She has fewer teeth than you, which, in your current state, strikes you as mildly appealing. Not because it means she's safer to kiss, though possibly, but because it suggests resilience. To have made it this far with that many missing parts takes grit. You raise your mug slightly in her direction. She does not respond. You respect that. No one talks to you here, not really. Occasionally someone will nod, or grunt, or gesture toward the hearth if it's spitting more than usual. But otherwise, you're left alone. That's one of the benefits of being what you are. People know what you do. They don't want the details, but they sense them, like a faint stench on the breeze. Your clothes, your skin, the way you flinch slightly when something squeaks. It's all a language they've learned not to speak, and so they avoid you, which most days is a kindness. The tavern fills slowly. Men with boots louder than their thoughts, women with eyes that have long since stopped looking, a few children crawling under tables in the half-feral way that guarantees survival. You eat what you can, you drink what you can. At one point, a man bumps your shoulder and mutters something that might be an apology. You nod. You don't care. Nothing in here is sharp enough to hurt you anymore. You think briefly of Cedric, your lice companion, and then of Gregory, who is now as silent as your appetite. Your stomach growls again. unsatisfied, but settling for what it's been given. You lick your spoon clean and slide the bowl aside. There is nothing left. You resist the urge to gnaw the bone. You've done it before, but only when drunk enough not to taste it. The woman across the way gets up and leaves. You watch her go, not out of interest, but because movement is rare and worth noting. She doesn't look back. No one ever does. You consider ordering another round of ale, but your coins are few, and your next job may not pay until tomorrow. Or at all. Some houses forget. Some pretend they never called you. Others give you bread as payment, or leftover soap, or simply a stern reminder that you're not to use the front entrance. You scrape your sleeve across your mouth and stand slowly. Your knees creak, your ankle pops, and your body shudders slightly under the effort. It's a familiar symphony of disrepair. You gather your sack, heavier than it should be, and nod to the barmaid. She doesn't see you. She's busy ignoring everyone equally. You step back into the street where the air is thicker than before, and the light has faded into full darkness. The city smells like coal and sweat, and something festering just out of reach. Your stomach is still empty, but your hands are steady, and the rats don't care how hungry you are. And, all things considered, you didn't bleed on anyone tonight. That's a good night. After supper, if that's still the word we're using for salted disappointment and fluid of unknown origin, you find yourself wandering, sack slung over one shoulder, stick tapping idly against the cobbles, like an old man's cane. You don't have a destination in mind. Most evenings you trudge back to your room, curl up beneath your threadbare blanket, and listen to the walls breathe until sleep drags you under. But tonight, your feet carry you in the other direction. Down narrower alleys, past boarded-up shop fronts, past windows lit by candlelight, and the occasional scream. You know where you're going, even if you don't admit it to yourself. The old plague pit sits behind the stone remnants of a forgotten chapel, swallowed now by ivy and indifference. It isn't marked, not properly. No plaque, no iron gate. Just a sunken patch of land, surrounded by crumbling walls, overgrown with weeds that never quite die, no matter how cold the winter gets. You've passed it before. Most people avoid it. They hurry by with their heads down, and their hands tucked close to their bodies, as if fearing infection might waft up from the soil like smoke. But you're not most people. You don't even think you qualify as a full person anymore. Not the way the city counts such things. You stop at the edge of the sunken ground and peer over the low wall. The earth has slumped unevenly in places, like it's still settling. Grass grows here, but it's thin and brittle, like hair on a corpse. A few shards of bone poke through the surface, pale against the dirt. Once you would have found that unsettling. Now you just note it absently. Femur, you think, or maybe a bit of rib. It's hard to say. You weren't trained in anatomy. You weren't trained in anything, really. Your education came from basements, bites, and the slow revelation that no one is coming to help. You sit on the wall, letting your sack thump gently against the stones, and stare into the pit. The rats don't come here much, which is strange. There's plenty to chew on, even centuries later. But maybe they know better. Maybe even they have a line. You tug at a loose thread in your coat and let the wind slide past your ears. It's cold now, but not sharp. Just enough to make your joints ache and your nose run. You wipe it on your sleeve and keep staring. You remember a time, vaguely, like a dream someone else told you about, when you weren't this. When rats were just creatures you saw in the corners. Not colleagues, not clients. When you still had fingernails without discoloration and teeth that didn't ache when you bit into crust. You were young once, not clean perhaps, but cleaner. Back when you believed illness was something temporary. Back when you thought bad smells were unusual. It's almost funny, in a bitter way. You used to think people like you were rare, that poverty was an accident you could outgrow. The pit doesn't answer, but it listens. You can feel it, that low, heavy silence, like something buried too deep to bother waking. There were stories growing up. that the dead down there still moved sometimes, that they whispered if you leaned close enough. You're not foolish enough to try, but you think you'd welcome it if they did. A bit of conversation wouldn't hurt, even from the long-rotted. You think about lying down, just for a minute. The grass looks soft, at least compared to your bed, and no one would stop you. Not here. It's not the kind of place that draws crowds. If you curled up on the edge and closed your eyes, it might feel like rest. Real rest. Not the kind interrupted by rats scurrying across your chest or your own cough waking you from dreams about drowning in sewage. The thought lingers, not seductive exactly, but familiar. You run your hand along the wall beside you and let the cold stone ground you. Not yet, not tonight. You hear footsteps behind you, faint and hurried. Someone heading home. Someone with things to do, people to answer to. You don't turn. They pass without seeing you. That's fine. You've grown used to it. You're not invisible, not exactly. But you've become part of the scenery, like smoke from a chimney or the mildew on a cellar wall. Present, unpleasant, and too permanent to acknowledge directly. You stand slowly, joints creaking like an old staircase. The sack shifts against your back with a dull thud. You don't bother looking inside. You know what's in there. You always know. You stretch once, as far as your stiff spine allows, and glance down at the pit one more time. No voices, no ghosts, just earth and memory and the weight of too many unnamed bones. You leave the way you came, retracing your steps through the city's dark veins, past shuttered windows and doors that were never open to you. The cold settles in deeper now, curling under your collar and along the seams of your shirt. You walk slower, not out of fatigue, but out of habit. If you go too fast, you'll get home before you're ready, and you're never really ready. Behind you the pit waits, patient, undisturbed, but not forgotten. The letter was vague, like most requests that involve the word urgent and end with a smudge of ink that might be a name or might be a rat's footprint. But you understood the message. Something beneath the tannery had moved, scratching, squeaking, that slow slithering sound that meant the rats had gone underground again, deeper than basements, deeper than cellars, into the veins of the city itself. No one wanted to follow, which meant of course it fell to you. You arrived just before midnight, sack empty, stick in hand, boots already wet from the walk through alleys that haven't seen proper drainage since the last monarch died. The tannery foreman is waiting, perched on a crate like a man guarding a trapdoor into hell. He gestures toward the open grate in the floor and mumbles something about blocking the pipes and making a racket. You nod without listening. He doesn't offer help. He doesn't offer hazard pay. Just a rusted lantern with a cracked lens and a promise of 3 shillings if you come back with proof. Not if. When? The grate opens into a stone shaft, slick with condensation and something darker. You lower yourself down one rung at a time, trying not to breathe too deeply. The air is warm, thick, and carries a stench so complex you stop trying to name its components after the first 5. You reach the bottom and splash into ankle-deep water that immediately begins soaking into your socks, despite every attempt to seal them earlier that evening with wax and thread. You curse softly, out of habit. The lantern sputters in your hand, casting flickering shadows on the curved brick walls that seem to pulse when you're not looking directly at them. You start walking, slowly, carefully. The tunnel narrows in places so you hunch your shoulders and duck your head, the ceiling dropping low enough that you brush your scalp against damp mortar. The water, not water really, not unless your definition includes grease, blood, refuse, and something the colour of bad ideas, climbs to your calves. Every step sucks at your boots, each movement a gamble. Something slithers past your shin. You freeze, it squeaks, you squeal. You recover your dignity with a cough and press on. The air grows thicker the deeper you go, not just warm now, but humid, a dense, cloying heat that clings to your skin like syrup. You wipe your forehead and come away with a smear of soot and sweat. Your hair sticks to your temples. Your shirt sags with moisture. The sack on your back begins to chafe, rubbing a sore spot on your shoulder that you'll feel for days. Your legs ache. Your stomach turns. But you keep walking. You don't get paid for comfort. You get paid for rats. You hear them before you see them. A low murmur, like water rushing through distant stones, but organic, frantic. The squeals rise, clash, merge into a chorus of hunger and panic. You round a bend and spot them, a congregation of movement clustered around a broken pipe, half submerged in the soup you're trudging through. Dozens of them, slick with filth, eyes glinting in the lantern light. One turns toward you, then another. Then the whole pack stills. You grip your stick tighter and take a slow step forward. The first swing lands true, splitting the air with a wet thunk that echoes off the walls. A rat skids into the water. The rest scatter, but not far. They've been here too long to fear you properly. You jab, sweep, slam. More noise than precision. Some fall. Others vanish into cracks you couldn't crawl through if your life depended on it. The water churns with hair and limbs, and chunks of things you can't identify. You grab 3 by the tail and swing them into the wall. One bites your hand mid-arc. You yelp, curse, stomp, and finally, breathe. It's over. For now. You catch your breath leaning against the tunnel wall, letting the lantern dangle at your side. The flame flickers, low and unsure, casting shadows that jitter like nervous memories. You press your injured hand to your coat, smear the blood into fabric already stained with too much to notice. You count the bodies, 5, maybe 6, and gather what's usable. The rest you leave. They'll decompose down here, just like everything else. The walk back is worse. Every step heavier, the water deeper, the stink richer and more personal. Something bursts underfoot, a bubble of gas maybe, or a rat corpse made soft by time. You gag, just once, a professional reaction. You climb back up the ladder slowly, joints groaning, head throbbing, sack dragging behind, like a ghost of your better judgment. The foreman is still there, or maybe he never moved. He eyes the sack, counts the tails, grunts. He hands you 3 shillings, each one sticky. You don't ask why. You don't ask for a towel. You don't ask for thanks. You just nod, pocket the coins, and step out into the night, dripping. Your boots squelch with each step. Your fingers sting. You smell like the devil's outhouse. And still, you're 3 shillings richer than you were an hour ago. You try not to think about what that says. By the time you make it home, the moon is somewhere behind a curtain of fog, thick enough to chew. Your legs ache with that deep, pulsing exhaustion that makes you feel ancient. Not with wisdom, but with rot. The bite on your hand is swollen. Your boots squelch. Your coat is stiff with grime. And your sack, long since emptied, smells like something crawled inside it and mourned itself to death. You unlock the door with fingers that barely bend and step into your room. The air inside greets you like a punch in the lungs. It smells worse than you remembered, though that might just be you. You peel off your coat first. It comes away reluctantly, as if it's become part of you. The sleeves are damp, the collar caked with residue from at least 3 different sewers. You hang it on the nail by the door, which immediately creaks under the weight. Next comes the shirt, which requires more effort. The fabric sticks to your back, soaked through with sweat, blood, and a streak of something greenish you stopped trying to identify hours ago. You tug it over your head and drop it in the corner, where it lands with a wet sound that turns your stomach a little. Your wash basin is no longer clean. It probably never was. The water inside has turned an opaque brown from previous rinses, topped with a thin film of scum that gently swirls when disturbed. You dip your hands in anyway. It's cold, shockingly so, and your skin tightens instantly in protest. You splash it over your face, then your neck, then your chest, trying to ignore the way it smells, like wet stone and regret. You scrub with a cloth that used to be white and is now more of a moral compromise. You use soap too, the hard stub of lavender-scented lye you ration like a luxury. It lathers, barely. The foam clings to the dirt but doesn't remove it, just rearranges it into a new, more disappointing shape. You work on your arms next, trying to scrub out the bite marks and the crusted sweat. The skin peels in places. You rub harder, trying to reach that imagined layer underneath all this, the one where you're still a person. It doesn't exist. You end up red and raw and still vaguely sticky. You pour the last of your water over your feet, watching the liquid turn black on contact and disappear into the floorboards with a sigh. Your feet, as always, remain unconvinced. The fleas emerge during this process, scuttling along your arms and up your thighs, unbothered by soap or scolding. One leaps onto your cheek, and you slap it without hesitation. The sting lingers longer than the insect did. You find another in your waistband, pinched between two fingers like a prize, and crush it without ceremony. You imagine its companions watching from the folds of your blanket, waiting. You know they'll return the moment you lie down. This isn't a battle, it's a formality. You inspect yourself in the cracked bit of mirror above the basin. Your face is pale, blotchy, and glistening. A red welt blooms along your neck from either a bite or the scrubbing. It's hard to tell. Your eyes are sunken, ringed with the kind of purple you'd expect from bruises, not sleeplessness. You smell faintly of lavender, yes, but also of decay and the deep underflavours of everything you touched today. The soap hasn't removed the sewer stench. It's only dressed it up, like putting perfume on a corpse. You reach for your shirt and hesitate. It's still damp, still awful, but you don't own another. Not really. There's the one with the missing sleeve and the other with the scorch mark and the hole in the back. Neither fit anymore. You lift the shirt, grimace, and pull it on. It hugs you like an enemy trying to make amends. You shiver, not from cold but from discomfort that has nowhere else to go. A sound catches your attention, a faint rustling near the hearth. You freeze. A pair of beady eyes blink at you from the shadows. Another rat. Not the bold kind, not one of your usual visitors. This one is small, careful. It doesn't run when you move closer. It just watches like it's judging you. You sigh. Get on with it, you mutter, and toss a breadcrumb its way. It snatches it, vanishes into the wall. You don't chase it. You're too tired to pretend the illusion of control tonight. You crawl into bed slowly, each joint cracking like a snapped wishbone. The blanket is thin, damp in places, and smells of oil and skin. You pull it over your body, listen to the faint scurrying under the floorboards, and wait for sleep to find you. It doesn't come quickly. It never does. Not when you feel things crawling over your legs. Not when you itch in places you didn't touch. You scratch, shift, curse softly into the dark. You are clean technically, cleaner than you were, but it hasn't made a difference. The filth is in you now, not just on your skin, in your clothes, your breath, your bones. You could bathe in holy water and still wake up with lice in your eyelashes. Clean as a lie, but it's one you tell yourself anyway, just to get through the night. Eventually, sleep finds you, though it doesn't knock politely. It slides in through the cracks, heavy and strange, pressing down on your chest like a damp stone. You drift sideways into unconsciousness, pulled under more by exhaustion than rest. Your body gives up before your mind does, and your thoughts blur into the shape of the dark, soft, scuttling, and damp around the edges. You dream, and in the dream there are rats, not just the usual swarm. These are larger, organised. They move with purpose, with unity, their little eyes glinting in a way that suggests something beyond instinct. They surround you in a perfect circle, all equidistant, their bodies twitching in silence, as if waiting for something. You stand in the centre, barefoot and shirtless, and the ground beneath you pulses with a warmth that feels alive. The air smells of sugar and decay. From the far end of the circle, a shadow stirs. The rats part like water, something steps forward. At first you think it's a man, hunched and hairy, but as it draws closer, you see the truth. It is a rat, enormous, regal in its own grotesque way. Its fur is matted but thick. Its eyes are a dull, ancient yellow. Its claws tap the ground with the rhythm of command. And when it speaks, it does so with the voice of someone who has waited a very long time to be heard. You've done well, it says, lips barely moving, voice echoing inside your skull more than your ears. You've served the filth faithfully. You've honoured the decay. We've watched you. It circles you slowly, its tail dragging behind like a rope through mud. Few walk the line between human and pest so elegantly. You are neither clean nor dead. That pleases us. You try to speak, but your tongue doesn't work. You nod instead, eyes wide, heart stuttering against your ribs. The Rat King continues, gesturing with one clawed hand toward the endless dark beyond the circle. We have need of someone like you, a liaison, an ambassador. The others up there, they poison, they trap, they fear. But you understand. You crawl, you itch, you bleed. Its face leans in close to yours and you smell the breath of centuries on its whiskers. You are one of us. Almost. It extends something. A paper scroll, perhaps, or a twist of tail skin, etched with symbols you've never seen. Accept our offer, it says, and you feel yourself reaching out, even before your mind has caught up. Your fingers touch the scroll, and the rats around you squeak in unison. Not fear, approval. Suddenly the floor gives out. You fall through warm blackness, the wind rushing past you filled with the smell of rotting bread and wet burlap. You land in your own bed with a jolt, gasping, sweat-soaked, heart hammering. The room is dark, but not fully. Moonlight filters through the window, glinting off something that shouldn't be moving. Your sack, it's wriggling. You freeze, still half in the dream. The sack which you emptied hours ago and tossed in the corner twitches again. A slow roll from side to side, then stillness. You stare at it, throat tight, nothing. No sound. Just the hush of night and the groan of your bed frame. You sit up, every muscle tensed, and glance around the room. Something is off. The blanket is twisted around your feet. The air smells wrong. Too sweet, too musty. And your pillow is gone. You look down. There's nothing under your head but mattress. You twist, searching the floor, the corner. The blanket folds. Nowhere. Your pillow has disappeared. In its place, a faint smear of something dark and sticky marks the edge of the bed. You reach out to touch it, then stop. Your fingers are already sore. Your head aches with that post-dream pressure that suggests you saw something real, but weren't meant to. The sack doesn't move again. It lies in the corner, slumped and heavy, same as always. You rub your eyes, run your hands through your hair and sigh. It was a dream. It had to be. You're not special. You're not chosen. You're not an ambassador of filth. But a part of you, the part that counts the bites in silence, the part that names lice, the part that still hasn't washed behind the left ear, because the rats seem to like it better that way, wonders. You lie back down, head resting on your forearm where the pillow used to be. You close your eyes. You try not to think about the voice or the warmth or the offer. In the dark, something squeaks near your ear. You don't flinch. You already accepted. Morning doesn't arrive so much as seep in through the cracks, grey and indifferent. The light has no warmth to it, no sense of beginning. It's just there, a dull intrusion through the grime-streaked window pane, painting your room in soft tones of rot and apathy. You don't move at first. Your body aches in familiar places and unfamiliar ones. The scabs on your leg itch. Your back feels like it's been folded. Your breath smells like the inside of an old boot left in a sewer. But you're breathing. For now. You stare at the ceiling. The rat's gone. Or hiding. Or dead. You can't hear it anymore. You don't bother checking the sack. Whatever was in it, dream or not, has long since made its decisions. Your pillow hasn't returned. You make do with your arm, which is numb from the shoulder down, but at least doesn't bite. The blanket has twisted itself around your legs, cocooning you in sweat and fabric and the faint scent of old soap. You peel it back slowly and sit up, bones crackling like firewood. There is no great epiphany, no swelling orchestral moment, just stiffness and a vague sense that today will be more or less like yesterday, if you're lucky. You look down at your hands, swollen knuckles and blackened nails, and wonder if you've lost another fingertip to the cold, or if the bruising just looks different in this light. Either way, it doesn't matter. You can still grip your stick. You can still carry the sack. That's all that's expected of you. That's all you are. You rise and move toward the hearth, not to warm yourself. The fire went out hours ago. But because the ground there is slightly cleaner, slightly softer, and the rats tend to avoid it when you're awake, you sit and stretch your legs out before you. Your boots, stiff with yesterday's sewer, give off a faint chemical smell that might once have been leather. You remove one and shake out a loose tooth. Not yours, hopefully. You don't remember spitting any out last night, but it's hard to keep track. You think about your legacy. It doesn't take long. There's not much to it. You've left no mark on the world beyond a few bloodstains and a long trail of half-rotted rodent corpses. No children. No name anyone will bother carving into wood, let alone stone. Your landlord doesn't know your surname. The rat merchant calls you you. The neighbours call you worse. No one will write songs about you. No one will read a ledger and pause at your line. Your scent, sharp, sour, faintly fungal, is the only thing that might linger after you're gone. A final insult to the air, and you will be gone soon enough. The cough that's been building in your lungs has started to stick around longer between fits. The swelling in your calf is spreading upward. You wake with night sweats now, the kind that leave your bedding soaked and your skin streaked with the salt of your own decay. It's coming, not in a dramatic way. No plague cart, no death rattle, just a slow, inevitable slide towards stillness. You think you might welcome it. When it comes, it'll be like everything else in your life, quiet, unwanted, and slightly damp. Maybe you'll die in your bed, curled under a blanket you never washed. Maybe you'll drop in a sewer tunnel, bleeding out beside the carcass of something you didn't kill fast enough. Or maybe, and this seems most likely, you'll be eaten, slowly, piece by piece, starting at the edges. You've always suspected you'd go that way. You've been leaving little bits of yourself behind for years. You think about what happens after. Not in the religious sense, that part you let go of a long time ago. No, you think about the practicalities. Your body, discovered or not, dragged or burned or bagged or ignored. Your bones eventually stripped and scattered. Maybe ground under a cartwheel. Maybe gnawed clean by a new generation of rats. Ones you never met, never trapped, never named. The idea doesn't upset you. It makes sense in a way. You've taken so many of them. It's only fair they get to take a little back. There will always be more rats. That's the only constant. More than people. More than coin. More than hope. They adapt. They thrive. You respect that. They aren't evil. They're just hungry, same as you. And when you're gone, someone else will take your place. Some boy with a sack and too much need. He'll scratch and bleed and think he's the first to do it this badly. He won't be. You never were. You lean back against the hearth wall and close your eyes for a moment. Just a moment. You tell yourself you'll get up soon, that you'll check the sack, that you'll look for work, that you'll boil water or mend your glove or visit the merchant. But not yet. Your limbs are heavy. Your breath is shallow. You could sleep or not. It makes no difference. The rats are quiet this morning. You think they're waiting. That's fine. You're tired. Let them wait. That brings us to the end of tonight's story. Not a tale of triumph, and certainly not of progress, but of a life dragged through filth until it forgot it was ever clean. If you're still listening, thank you for joining me in the gutters, where survival has no poetry, dignity is a liability, and the rats outnumber us in every meaningful way. If you'd like early access to future episodes, ad-free audio versions of these stories, or just want to support the channel as we continue chronicling lives that history left to rot, you'll find the Patreon link in the description. You can also like, subscribe, or leave a comment about which grim, forgotten corner of the past you'd like to visit next. And if you're listening on a podcast app, a rating or review helps others find their way to these stories. Sleep well.